Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, your friendly guide to the English language. We talk about writing, history, rules, and other cool stuff. Today, we're going to talk about words that sound gendered but aren't, and then we'll talk about why all grammars leak. Since the 1970s, the English language has been evolving to include more gender-inclusive terms. For example, chairman has become chairperson, fireman has become firefighter, and policeman, police officer. When we're on an airplane, we're cared for by flight attendants, not stewardesses. Our letters are delivered by a mail carrier, not a mailman, and we usually refer to all of humanity as humankind, not mankind. I think we can all agree that these changes are positive, but we also know there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. And we started to wonder, are there words that might seem gendered, but actually aren't? We looked at words starting with the prefixes man and cock, signifying male, and gyn, G-Y-N, signifying female. Here's what we found. For starters, the word man can be traced back to Germanic dialects like Old Saxon, spoken between the 8th and 12th centuries AD. Back then, man, spelled M-A-N-N, was a more neutral term. It referred to people in general, and also to just males. Over time, its meaning evolved, and today, man almost exclusively refers to just males. But not every word that starts with man comes from this ancient German root. For example, the words manage and manager seem like perfect candidates to be gendered terms. They start with man, and they have to do with bossing people around. But surprise, they're not gendered. These words don't come from the Germanic word man. Instead, they come from the circa 1300 Italian word maneggiare, meaning to exercise a horse. They're also related to the Middle French word ménage, meaning to arrange with care. The same root gives us the word menagerie, meaning a collection of wild animals kept in captivity, which doesn't always feel that far off from office life. To be fair, the root word within maneggiare is manus, meaning hand. And in classical Latin, the word manus did convey the power of a husband over a wife. But that meaning fell out of use with the fall of the Roman Empire, way back in 476 AD. The word manufacture is also built on the Latin word manus, meaning hand. In this case, it's paired with the Middle French word facture, which referred to how well a painting was executed. Over time, the sense of something being hand-painted evolved to being handmade. In other words, manufactured. Manipulate also didn't come from the Germanic man. It was borrowed from French. In the 17th century, the time of the scientific revolution, manipulation referred to a method of digging silver ore. That word, in turn, came from the French manipule, meaning a handful. At the time, that was a unit of measure used by pharmacists. And the derivation of manipule? That came from taking the Latin word manus and adding plere, meaning to fill. A manipule was literally a handful. By the 1800s, the meaning of manipulate had broadened to include managing anything skillfully, especially with your hands. It soon developed a darker meaning, to control someone using subtle, insidious means. Mandate is another word that sounds like it could be gendered. And in past history, most authoritative commands probably did come from guys. But mandate actually comes from the Latin mandatum. That meant a command, instruction, or imperial directive. The related word mandatory, meaning obligatory or required by law or rule, comes from the Latin mandatorius, the adjective form of mandatum. And like the other words we've talked about, this root probably goes back to the word for hand. Next, we looked at various words that contain the word cock. Since the earliest days of Old English, the first centuries AD, cock meant a male domestic chicken. A cockerel was a young male chicken, and those words continue with just the same meaning today. But as with man, not all such words signify maleness. The term cockamamie comes from the French word décalcomanie, a method of transferring designs from specially prepared paper onto glass. According to one newspaper, decalcomanying household objects became a virulent craze in the 1860s. It was such a craze, apparently, that the word transmuted into cockamamie, meaning ridiculous or absurd. Similarly, cold cock, meaning to knock unconscious, comes from an entirely different meaning of cock, to bend or tilt the body at an angle. Cockeyed, meaning askew or crooked, draws from the same meaning, as does cock-up, meaning a mistake or blunder. However, some words do refer back to the root word meaning a male chicken. For example, cockpit, meaning the place in an airplane pilots sit, is a compound word. Its most literal sense is a hole in the ground, a pit, for a guy chicken, a cock, and most pilots used to be guys. Cocktail, another compound, refers to the tail of a male chicken. Its meaning as a mixed drink is a bit fuzzy. Apparently, horses with docked tails that stuck up in the air were described as cocktailed. In other words, their tails stuck up like a chicken's. Over time, cocktailed came to refer to a non-thoroughbred horse, one of mixed breed. This sense of mixed breed extended to mixed drinks, if you believe the story. To wrap up, we took a quick look at words that contain gyn, like gynecology and misogyny. They're derived from the ancient Greek gyneco, meaning woman or female. Try as we might, we couldn't find any gyn words that didn't signify femaleness. Gynecology refers to the medical care of women's reproductive systems. Gynecium refers to the female parts of a flower. There's even epigynum, meaning the external genital structure of a female spider. I didn't know there was a word for that. Long story short, we've come a long way in crafting more gender-inclusive language. I think we can all agree that firefighter and police officer are fine professional titles. Moreover, we needn't worry about erasing other words like manage or mandate that might seem gendered but aren't. With that research done, I think I'll make a cockamamie plan to have a cocktail and mandate that all around me enjoy their day as well. That segment was written by Samantha Enslen, who runs Dragonfly Editorial. You can find her at dragonflyeditorial.com. This next segment is by Edwin Battistella. Anthropologist Edward Sapir once wrote, "Unfortunately or luckily, no language is tyrannically consistent. All grammars leak." Sapir was talking about the irregularities of language. For me, this leakiness is especially evident in what I think of as doppelganger words. Many of our most common words have come to serve more than a single grammatical role. So a word serving one part of speech will often have a homonym, a grammatical doppelganger, that serves as a different part of speech. Often this arises from what's called functional shift, when we take a noun and make it into a verb, as in to adult or to gym. This shiftiness makes it hard and perhaps impossible to think of a word as having just one categorization. Here's an example. Recently, a friend told me that her daughter's teacher had told her never to use the word that. She wondered if the advice was legit. "It depends," I said, "which that we're talking about." This humble four-letter word can serve as a pronoun, adjective, conjunction, or even an adverb. When we say, "hand me that," the word is functioning as a demonstrative pronoun, referring to something oriented away from the speaker, as opposed to this. But if we say, "hand me that book," it's functioning as an adjective, though again indicating orientation. If we say, "have you seen the person that was just here?" the word is a pronoun again, a relative pronoun, linking the noun person to the clause "that was just here." Phew! That can also be a straight-up subordinating conjunction, introducing a clause functioning as a noun. I told you that I would be right back. This "that" is the one that writers often cut to make prose move along more quickly. I told you I'd be right back is often preferred on grounds of conciseness. This is what my friend's daughter's teacher was talking about. And last but not least, that can even be an intensifying adverb, as in, yes, it is that complicated. Now, we might quibble about these characterizations. Perhaps the adjective that and the demonstrative pronoun that are related. Hand me that being a reduced form of hand me that book. But the larger point is pretty clear. Our simplest words serve more than a single function. Grammars leak and words have doppelgangers. That isn't the only word that does double or even triple or quadruple duty. The words have, be, and do, for example, can be auxiliary verbs. You may know these as helping verbs because they help the main verb, or the main verbs themselves. In I have just arrived, the word have helps the main verb arrived. But in I have a question, have is the main verb. Sometimes words are so common that we don't even think to question their status. Take the word up. It's a preposition, right? I walked up the block for a cup of coffee. But up can also be an adverb, as in he jumped up. Or it can be part of a compound verb. We fixed up the house. Or she wrote up the report. Up can even be used as an adjective or verb. It was an up day for the markets. Or the university has upped tuition again. The stereotypical characterization of up as a preposition doesn't do justice to its flexibility. The flexibility and homonymy of English words is pervasive. Words like yesterday, today, and tomorrow can be nouns or adverbs. Compare tomorrow is another day with I'll finish the work tomorrow. The word who can be an interrogative pronoun, who left, or a relative one, I saw the person who you mentioned. Before and after can be prepositions or subordinating conjunctions. I left after class, or I left after I saw them. Well can be an interjection or an adverb, as in, well, I never would have believed that, and the old car runs well. And of course, you and they can be singular or plural pronouns. So if you expect a word to have a unique meaning or function, you're likely to be disappointed. Words are pressed into service for new functions all the time, and the list of such grammatical doubles goes on and on. Sometimes, though, the status of a word becomes a matter of minor controversy. A librarian I know was called out on social media for using fun as an adjective, a fun event. As a librarian, you should know better, her online scolder remarked. Well, fun has been an adjective for quite some time. Others get annoyed about the shift of a super from adjective status to intensifying adverb, as in she was super smart. And a few years ago, the media was abuzz with concerns about the word because being used as a preposition, as in because reasons or because science, rather than sticking to its more traditional role as a subordinating conjunction, because language changes. People who thought the usage was an abomination when they first heard it were using it regularly within a few weeks, at first ironically and then routinely. And Oxford Dictionaries lists these uses of because, super, and fun, tagging them, for now, as informal. So before we get too judgmental about nouns being used as verbs or adjectives being used as nouns or as adverbs, let's take a moment to appreciate the flexibility of the parts of speech. As Edward Sapir put it, the multiplicity of ways in which we express ourselves may be a welcome luxuriance or an unavoidable and traditional predicament. Which it is may depend on our temperament. That segment was written by Edwin Battistella, who taught linguistics and writing at Southern Oregon University in Ashland, where he served as a dean and interim provost. His books include Bad Language, Why Some Words Are Better Than Others, Sorry About That, The Language of Public Apology, and Dangerous Crooked Scoundrels, Insulting the President from Washington to Trump. It originally appeared on the OUP blog and is included here with permission. Finally, I have a Familect story.
Hi, Grammar Girl. Thanks for your great podcast. This is Kieran from Sydney, Australia. I grew up as one of 5 children. Here is our Familect. When the grandchildren were all young, Mum and Dad would invite all of us over for weekend dinner. Mum and Dad, their 5 children and 5 spouses, and the 9 grandchildren, for a total of 21 of us at the family home. It could get quite chaotic. Mum would be making her wonderful roast dinner, and the grandchildren would be running around screaming. Eventually, Mum would get to a rest point in meal prep and announce, "It's time for an aperitif." By this she meant a brandy and lemonade. Dad ran the bar, so the grandchildren would rush into the living room and tell him, "Papa, Papa, Nana needs a pair of teeth." To this day, when my siblings or the grandchildren, who are now all grown up, some with children of their own, plan a get-together with food and alcohol, it is always listed on the family calendar as, for example, 2 p.m. Saturday the 10th at Mum and Dad's, a pair of teeth. Thanks again, Grammar Girl, for allowing us to share.
Thanks, Kiernan. That's adorable. And I feel like that one would make a nice cartoon, too. Grammar Girl is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Thanks to Morgan Christensen in advertising, Brandon Getchis, director of podcasts, Dan Feieroppend in audio, Davina Tomlin and Nat Hoops in marketing, and Holly Hutchings in digital operations, who loves the smell of lemon cake because it reminds her of her grandma. Be sure to check in on Thursday because I have a fabulous interview for you. I talked with the editors of the new edition of the Chicago Manual of Style. They only update the book once every 7 years, so there was a lot to talk about. I'm Mignon Fogarty, better known as Grammar Girl and author of the tip-a-day book, The Grammar Daily. That's all. Thanks for listening.